Hey copycat quilters, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to take a look at one of the first quilts I ever made. This one is wall hanging size and it has those triangles in it that make it look like it has curves. So I don't even remember if I made this from a pattern or not, but I'm going to break it down, figure out the pieces, and make a new modern version of this quilt. So stick around and I'll show you what I'll do.
Here's the quilt I made some time ago that I decided to make into a new, more modern and larger version. When I look at this quilt, I want to break it down into blocks so I can figure out how to remake it. So I'll start at the top left corner because I figured this out. We read left to right, top from bottom, and so that's why I tend to start up here in the top. So if I look at these blocks or look at this quilt, I can see here that I have a 9 patch and that the ones in the corners are half square triangles. And I'm going to color those so that whenever I copy it over to another page, I'll remember which parts are the colored and which are the backgrounds. I can also see the next block is also a 9 patch, same size squares. But in this one, I have these triangle and a square blocks on the outside edges and a colored block in the center. When I come back over to the quilt, I can see that it's basically those two blocks repeating over and over again, and they are just alternating.
On this quilt, I have 5 blocks across and 5 blocks down.
You do want your rows and corners to start and finish with the same shape. So here I have that 9 patch with the half square triangles in the corners. So it needs to be an odd number across the quilt. One thing I did want to point out is that on this quilt, I also included these triangle and the squares around in the border of the quilt. And I'll show you why later when I show the quilt that I made before where I didn't do this. If I leave those triangle and squares out, I'll end up getting a block like this, and you don't get the full round effect of the entire block. When I come over and look at my blocks, now I want to figure out what size to make these squares. I decided I'd like for them to be 12-inch blocks because I want to make a big quilt and I don't want a lot of little tiny pieces, so 12-inch blocks will make it go together really quickly. If I have 5 blocks across, I've got a 60-inch quilt. So now if this is going to be 12 inches, I need to figure out how big I need my pieces to be. I have the 8-inch cube from Accuquilt, and that's always my preferred method. And the 8-inch cube is based on a 4-patch. All of the cubes are. And each shape then would be 4 inches. And that makes an 8-inch square. So the 8-inch cube has 4 pieces that are 4 inches each. In order to get this up to a size 12, I just need to add another row of 4 inches and another column of 4 inches. And that should look familiar. It's a 9 patch. For block A, I'm going to need 4 half square triangles, and those are background in color. I'll just call it color, but it could be whatever, a print or solid, whatever you want. And then I need 4 squares that are background, and I need 1 square that's color. For my block B, I need 4 background squares, and I need 1 color square for the middle. And then for those 4 triangle squares, I need 4 of the triangle pieces in color, and I need 4 sets of wings. I call those wings, the outside edges, in background. So there are the basic shapes that I need to build these blocks. I'm also going to need to make some extras of these triangle and square that I can use in my border. Now I mentioned that I'll be using my cubes, and so I would take my 8-inch cube and I would cut the half square triangle pieces, I would cut my squares, and then I also have the dies to cut the triangles in a square. So I know not everyone has Accuquilt, and I wanted to show you how you can figure out what sizes to cut. We know these pieces are each going to be 4 inches. For my squares, I'm going to cut all my squares at 4.5 inches so that I have enough seam allowance around, because you always take the size of the square and then you add a 1/4 inch all the way around. So all of my squares will be 4.5 inches. For the half square triangle, if you're not using Accuquilt, you can use some of the trimmer tools or those specialty rulers that help you cut a half square triangle. You're going to need 4 of those that are a mix of the background color and then the color. And I would suggest, if you're going to be cutting them without a ruler, that you use the 2 squares on top of each other, draw the line down the middle, and sew a seam down each side, and then cut them apart, the standard way to make a half square triangle. The measurement needs to end up at 4.5. I found in order to end up with a 4.5 inch half square triangle, which is what I need here, I cut mine at about 5 3/8, just before the 5.5 mark. So you might could go around 5 1/4 instead of 3/8, which is just a little bit more, but it really depends on how you feel about having waste. I did not feel I had too much to cut off for the 5 3/8, but I know some people are more concerned or sensitive and want to be much closer. So find out how much you need to add to make your squares to where whenever you cut down the middle and do that pressing and do a little bit of trimming, you've got the amount of waste that you like. For the triangle and square blocks, I'll link you to a series of videos that I've already done that show how to make them using EQ8, how to make them using a tri-rec ruler, and also how to do them with foundation paper piecing. I would suggest, if you want to do the paper piecing, search on the internet and look for triangle and a square finishes to 4.5 inches, and you'll find all kinds of free printouts that you can do. I'll see if I can find one and put it in the link below as well. I wanted to lay these two out side by side so you could see. The one on the left is the first quilt that I made using these triangle and square blocks, and then the one on the right is the most recent. If you look at the block on the left, you can see I have the basic 9 patch, and then around that I have the triangle and square blocks pointing out. And then my background is also the 9 patch all around. On the quilt on the right, you can see I still have a basic 9 patch here, but I did the corners with the half square triangles. And then I have the triangle and square blocks, but look how much smaller they are than the quilt on the left. Those triangle and a square blocks actually come from the block beside it, not added onto the edges. But because I don't have the 9 patches in these areas in between as backgrounds, you get a really different look from the quilt on the left and the quilt on the right. But you do still get the movement and the curve effect.
So let me know in the comments below what you think about this quilt. I really enjoy making these quilts that have the illusion of curves, and I already have in mind the next quilt that I want to do using these isosceles triangles that really give you that sense of movement. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I will also link to the playlist of the triangles that give you many different ways to make those triangles in a square, and a little bit of arguing about, is it isosceles, is it equilateral? That was just kind of for fun, but I enjoyed that video a lot. And I will also link to that first quilt that I showed in the comparison. So please join me again, and I hope you enjoy your quilting as much as I do mine.